Today on LPGP Influence, we have Neil Bansal from OMERS. Neil, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. This is it's one of my bucket list items to be here.
Very kind of you to say. Very kind of you to say. That's a brilliant line. Neil, just for the people at home, private equity is a very niche space. What was your pathway into it?
Yeah, it's been a windy road. Honestly, I when I think about my career path, sometimes I think I term it into cash, booze, and sneakers. That's been like the route before private equity. So that is not your typical one. But I've spent a lot of time in industry. I mean, before industry, I was doing banking and I was a management consultant at McKinsey. So just all of the foundational elements. And then I wanted to take that and go inside a company and figure out, all right, how do you make the change happen? And so I spent time in financial services, 8 years there, just like helping banks during a very challenging time when fintechs were coming in and disrupting the business models, and then pivoted into beverage alcohol, obviously, and did that for a little while. And then I was Chief Strategy Transformation Officer at Foot Locker. And you know, the theme between all of those is coming into environments of like a lot of change, the customer evolving, and the role of technology and digital becoming an increasingly part of that experience and the things that companies had to manage through. And so doing that for 13 years inside industries, for me, I wanted to then kind of take that and say, okay, how can I now, I've been an operator, I've been inside companies, how can I advise and help with our private equity model that has a longer arc? We're not in quarterly earnings cycles. We can take a longer view and we can dig in, and having that ownership is also something that I thought really exciting.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a theme of adaptability to yourself as a person that has proven to be key. Would it be fair to say you've kind of had to be a chameleon to kind of get to where you currently sit?
You could use that word chameleon, Hunt. I will actually use this after this. I like that one. I mean, I feel like I've always been in environments where maybe I wasn't the most obvious person. I mean, I worked at a French bank. You can see me. I am not French. I do not speak very good French at all. And I was in New York. I wasn't here in France. And so, you know, being in that kind of environment, very different, obviously. And then beverage alcohol, CPG. I had never spent time in CPG. And then retail at Foot Locker. Obviously, no retail experience, and even moving into private equity, I'd never spent time in a private equity fund. I actually looked at being a chameleon in some ways as an advantage, because I'm coming in and I'm bringing my skill set and I'm asking different kinds of questions and looking at things with a different frame. But the underlying things to be successful in terms of building connections, really learning that space, be able to connect the dots and figure out how you can drive value in these environments is not all that different. But you do so just knowing that each of those places you're a student of that business, student of the industry. So in private equity, I've been 2.5 years. I feel like I'm a student of private equity. But I'm constantly learning. I'm a student of AI. So the learning is really there. But you build on your foundations. You build on the fact that you've been in all these different environments of change. And you leverage that to be successful.
Okay. Change central to the pathway here. And as an AI operating partner, I'm guessing in addition to having to negotiate change yourself, you're having to help other people negotiate change. What does that look like?
It's fascinating, because when you're in a company, you're part of that team, and you lock arms together and you go. And here, our model at OMERS Private Equity is one of enablement and it's partnership. So it's very different. So I'm not coming in and saying, Hans, did you do those 3 things that I mentioned last week? Otherwise, we're having a difficult conversation. Like, that's not the way that we roll. It's about truly partnering with you, figuring out what are the things that we all said we were going to do to drive value as part of our value creation plan. And then where can I play a role as an accelerator? How can I help you make progress along that pathway? And if you're partners, true partners, you speak truth to power and you say what's on your mind and you're trying to be helpful. But at the end of the day, it's the companies that have agency. I'm not there to run the companies, but I'm there to help them be successful. And that really starts with partnering with the leadership team and with the CEO is the most important, because it's at the top. I mean, I know it's very cliche, but that is the first spot where you have to have someone who's bought into what you're trying to do. If you don't have that, you know, it's very hard to be able to effectuate change.
You speak about the partnership with the management team at the portfolio company. Is it fair to say you're almost like the conduit between the deal team at the fund and the management team that you're partnering with?
Yeah, you are that connective tissue because you're on the ground. I mean, you're seeing what's happening there in a way that others may not be from their vantage point.
Sure.
And my style is to go deep. So I try to get out of the 73rd floor of our office building and actually to the companies themselves, because that's where you hear things, that's where you see things. We have an HVAC company, 60 brand residential HVAC company.
Yeah.
Last year, I went in and I went and did a ride along in a truck with a technician because I wanted to understand how this works up close. And in the first 2 minutes, he made it clear that he doesn't believe in AI and doesn't think it's something that he's scared of it and doesn't want to use it. And then I didn't tell him what I do.
Yeah.
I was like, keep going.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So keep going. Tell me more. This sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But then you learn like why, and you see like some of the adoption challenges. And then we went into a customer's home, and he's spending 15 minutes trying to figure out how to open this very old unit that the customer had.
Okay.
Not realizing that actually would have been nice if you could have taken a photo of that, and AI would have told you, here are the 3 things to do,
Of course.
and you would have spent a minute versus 15. But again, it's like that. Though you wouldn't understand that if you're not up close, you're not really where the customers are.
Sure.
And where that's happening at the front lines.
So having that conversation allows you to position AI as a companion as opposed to a competitor. Would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a language problem around AI and digital broadly. When I was in beverage alcohol, I remember I went in and I was talking about how we need to stand up a digital program. I think of digital as encompassing AI and tech and data and analytics. And people were telling me, well, I'm a little too busy for that. It's not the right time because we're out of stock on this beer, or we're having this marketing issue. Yep. And so all the issues that I was hearing about were all things that AI, digital transformation, acceleration could address. But it sounded like I was talking about something completely separate and a complete distraction. And so it wasn't until I really brought it home to the problems that people were trying to solve for that it made sense. And so when you have all these buzzy words like AI, trying to make it a little bit more specific, make it real, connect it to problems in the business that people are trying to do, that's a much bigger unlock than speaking from the top.
Yeah, no, for sure. So with that, I guess you'd call it cutting through the noise. What do you think we really need to focus in on as being the things that create outcomes and realizes commercial objectives when it comes to AI? What should we focus in on?
Yeah, AI is exciting. It is a lot of shiny objects, a lot of tools, a lot of things that people look at and they run to. But that is such a scattershot approach. And so what I see sometimes with our companies is they're almost trying to do too much. I mean, someone said companies get more in trouble for overeating than indigestion, right? All right, why do we step back for a moment and say, what are we trying to solve for? Like, what's our business objective? What's our strategy as a company? What are the big problems that we can get right that are going to be differentiating for our business? Taking a very customer consumer lens to it.
Sure.
I think that's where you have to start and put together a plan and have AI serve that. And if you do that and you create a roadmap of those kinds of opportunities, and then you figure out, okay, across that roadmap of opportunities, what is the impact of those? How easy is it to get there? What's the speed at which we'll be able to do it? That is a much more grounded, disciplined, methodical approach. It might feel like you're going a little slow, but it's to go slow to go fast, right? Because you need to understand, do you have the right data foundations?
Sure.
What's your tech stack? Do you have the right people? All of that in place. And then you can be intentional to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we don't have to be best in class in all of these things. Maybe we're going to be best in class in these 2 things because they really matter. And these other things, we can be good enough.
Sure.
But you're not going to know that unless you've stepped back and you looked at this from a holistic company lens and put a plan together. And that's what we do with our private equity portfolio companies. And it may not be all things we do in our hold period. It could be 5 initiatives we do over the next 2-3 years, and we'll have the others could be done for the next buyer.
So when you're formulating that plan, how much of that plan is influenced by the investment thesis?
It's all connected. It's all connected. It has to be. So we make sure we have a clear value creation thesis, how we're driving value. I mean, we look at this in the diligence phase. When we're looking at a company, we want to understand, okay, what is the potential revenue upside of this company? What is the cost profile? What's the kind of pace of change? Are we talking about an industry where things are moving really rapidly? or is it a little bit slower? Because that'll inform how aggressive we may need to be.
Okay.
Do we have the right readiness? So we'll dig into the data, dig into the tech. Again, just to understand what is the departure point. And so in the things that we want to do, we don't want to be surprised if there's a huge investment that we didn't realize.
Sure.
Or if it is much more of a transformational effort, are we the right partners or not? We have to understand that. Is AI going to disrupt this space a lot more?
Yeah.
We have to see. I mean, we bought a managed service provider, and you could see in the managed service provider space, these companies that are providing managed IT services and cloud and cyber, it's important. But in a world where AI is abundant and specialized skills can be gotten digitally, things are going to change in terms of the customer expectations. So you've got to do more than just providing a help desk.
Okay, yes.
Now those same customers are probably going to benefit more from outcomes on AI. Can you help them achieve outcomes in their business using technology that they may not understand? Especially if they're a small, medium-sized business, which our managed service provider targets. They don't know how to connect the AI to the outcome in the business that they want. That's where the value is. It's not in a lot of the areas that you've historically done. Those are going to become increasingly table stakes. So understanding that at the time that you're making that investment is important.
One of the things that's often cited whenever we talk about AI is data readiness and ensuring that the ship is fit to sail.
Yep.
How much of a problem is that actually when you get into these implementations?
I mean, it is something that you see as it can be gating for some of the companies. I'm actually at OMERS. We've been out in the market looking for somebody who can help us on data and analytics because we see it as so foundational, and especially in the middle market and a lot of the companies we're targeting. The data may not be organized. We may not be actually making decisions off that data. So it's sometimes the actual technical parts of the data. And like, is it in a data lake? And then the other part of it is how we're using it to make faster, better decisions in the business.
Okay.
So you could have the data, but if it's not actually driving any business outcomes, then we'd want to understand that and tackle it as well. So that's part of what we would assess where they are in that journey and what it will take to kind of get to where we want.
So when the data is feeding the AI that outputs these or influences these decisions, what do you do when those AI-driven decisions clash with some of the human-derived decisions?
Yeah, we try not to look at it as maybe Hans like necessarily like a clash, right? Like
controversial language.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Is there necessarily a clash? I mean, sometimes what happens is we look at the kind of automations and things we can do in the business that make sense. Like, so as the managed service provider, you want to have intelligent routing because you want to be able to get the ticket to the right technician at the right time. So if you're that technician, that's good for you because technology's helped you in that case optimize the match between the problem and your skill set, right? So those are the types of things where the humans benefit greatly from being able to have the technology at the front end go through it. And that's what we try to look for is where we can assist folks in terms of the roles that they're in. And then sometimes these roles do evolve. We might need somebody for something else. I mean, there's one of our companies, for instance, they had a huge challenge of asking people to automate about 4.5 hours of their per week of their jobs. So they called it Power 4 Hour. It was a company-wide initiative. And then as part of this whole initiative, somebody in an interview coordinator role figured out a way to automate their entire job. So they went beyond the 4. It was like, let me just do the full thing. And they used custom GPTs, Google App Scripts, and they did that. And what did the company do? They promoted the person.
Oh,
so
wow,
saying,
amazing.
okay, like you're promoted. So I can't think of a better message than you've automated, you're going to be rewarded. You're not going to be punished. And I think that sends a really strong signal inside a company that you're here to evolve the business. You're going to care for the people. And I think that's important. That change and the adoption and driving that is critical.
Sure. So do you see AI as being the tool that handles some of the boilerplate work? So the workforce can do that more interesting, more creative work that they otherwise perhaps don't have as much time to do?
Yeah. I would say like there's some of the roles, like, I mean, customer service is a role that you obviously AI has played a pretty big role.
Sure.
Now, if you check on LinkedIn, everyone positions it as some type of easy button and just put it in call centers and everything else. But those are roles, the underlying problem in a lot of these roles, Hans, is the attrition is really high. I mean, it's hard to keep people in those roles, and some of them they're up to 40%. So you're training people up and they're not staying very long. So the technology of having AI answer the calls in these call centers allows you to actually be a lot more effective with the edge cases, with the more complicated cases. Those roles can evolve to thinking about the entire customer journey or to drive loyalty. And I think those are much more powerful and value-added jobs in the enterprise than some of these other roles that have existed. So it's that role evolution. And I think if you identify those and you send the right messages around how you're going to bridge people into those, that I think is very powerful.
Okay, interesting. So essentially AI will address the jobs that people don't even want to do anyway.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases you have that. And we talk to people, and if they're doing steps 1 and 2 of a 5-step process, and they don't know what steps 3, 4, and 5 are, but they just keep doing 1 and 2, you talk to them, and it's not that they're finding those roles to be very interesting, but they're kind of locked into that because that's what they've done. And so to help them understand what are the other possibilities of what they can do, and then again, using the technology, using custom GPTs, back to that company that's encouraging everyone to embrace GPTs, learn AI, figure out how it applies to your job, get hours back. The whole concept company-wide is let's find 300,000 hours of work that we were doing that is not value-added and put it into hours that are value-added.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that type of bridge to say, hey, what else could you be doing? And putting that at the employee level to be driven is something that we were trying to achieve, not let's just take all the hours out. It's shifting those hours to more value.
Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Before we wrap, we play a game called This or That, where I will give you 2 options. You can't say both, you can't explain, you just have to choose the one.
I've been waiting for this game.
Okay. Let's start first. Crypto versus gold.
Crypto.
Controversial one given the conversation. People or AI?
People.
Equity or debt?
Equity.
Public or private markets?
Private markets, Hans, come on.
Developed or emerging markets?
Emerging.
Cash cow versus a unicorn?
Cash cow.
And $5 million today or $50,000 per month for your life?
I'll take the money up front.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't explain why, right?
Yeah.
But I'll take the money up front.
Show me today.
Show me today.
All right, great. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Hans. This has been great.
Cheers.